The sun had just begun to slip behind the jagged ridge of the Arizona Territory, spilling long shadows across the desert floor and staining the sky a deep amber. Samuel Cutter rode in silence, his hat pulled low, his eyes squinting against the last light as dust rose around his horse's hooves. The horse, a strong bay named Solomon, had carried him faithfully through 100 hard miles of dry country and harder memories. Cutter was a man who'd known both war and wilderness, a Union scout turned drifter after the guns fell silent. The world had grown quiet since the fighting ended, but inside him the old noise still lived, the thunder of hoofbeats, the scream of rifle fire, and the smell of burning powder that never quite washed off. He rode now for no reason better than habit, following the land wherever it pulled him, stopping only long enough to water his horse and keep his coffee pot blackened by fire. The day had been long and still, the kind of stillness that presses on the ears until every creak of leather sounds like thunder. But as the evening came, Solomon began to act uneasy. His ears pricked toward the east, his head lifting and turning as if catching a sound his rider could not. Cutter tightened the reins slightly, watching the animal's muscles ripple beneath its hide. "What is it, boy?" he murmured. Solomon snorted, stamping once, nostrils flaring. Cutter had learned long ago to trust the instincts of his horse. Beasts often knew what men did not. They had been riding the edge of old Apache country, though the war bands had quieted since the Army's last campaign. Still, Cutter knew better than to take chances. He had seen too many men die with their rifles half drawn and their mouths open in surprise. He scanned the horizon, eyes narrowing at the wavering heat that blurred the line between sand and sky. Nothing moved but the tumbleweed and the slow circling of a hawk overhead. Yet Solomon's unease deepened. The horse tugged at the reins, pulling toward a dry wash that cut through the landscape a few hundred yards ahead. Cutter hesitated, then gave in to the animal's instinct. "All right," he muttered, "you lead, I'll follow." The wash dipped low between sandstone walls, cool shadow clinging to its floor. Solomon picked his way carefully, hooves crunching through dry gravel. The air was heavy with the smell of sage and something else, faint, metallic, unpleasantly familiar. Cutter's stomach tightened as he recognized it: blood. His hand went automatically to the revolver at his hip. He dismounted, leading Solomon forward on foot, his boots making almost no sound on the loose earth. A few more steps, and he saw her. She lay half hidden among the reeds near a trickle of water, her skin dark against the pale sand, her hair black as a raven's wing spread across the ground. An Apache woman, young, no more than 20 perhaps, dressed in buckskin torn and stained dark with blood. For a moment Cutter thought she might already be dead. Then he saw the faint rise and fall of her chest, shallow but steady. His heart thudded once, hard. He had seen wounded before, soldiers, settlers, Indians alike, and the sight no longer shocked him. But something about this woman stirred him in a way he couldn't name. Maybe it was the quiet defiance still etched into her face even in unconsciousness, or maybe it was the simple fact that she was alone out here, miles from any camp or trading post. He knelt beside her, his shadow falling across her face. The wound looked like a bullet had grazed her side, tearing through the flesh but missing the bone. Whoever had done it hadn't stayed to finish the job. Cutter hesitated. The Apaches and white men had been enemies for as long as he could remember. He'd fought them once, chased them through the canyons on orders from men who thought every native was a threat to be erased. Yet here was one of them, bleeding into the dirt, and his horse, of all creatures, had led him to her. He looked at Solomon, who stood quietly now, ears forward, eyes on the woman as if waiting. "You picked her out, didn't you?" Cutter said softly. "All right then." He tore a strip from his shirt and pressed it against the wound, stopping the bleeding as best he could. The woman stirred faintly, her eyelids fluttering open for a moment. Her gaze found him, wary, dark, confused, and for an instant there was nothing in the world but those eyes. Then she slipped back into unconsciousness. Cutter poured a little water from his canteen over her lips, careful not to give too much. She swallowed reflexively. The sun was nearly gone now, and night would come cold in the desert. He had two choices: leave her and ride on, or stay and risk being found by whoever had put a bullet in her. He looked again at Solomon, who was pawing the ground impatiently, as if urging him to decide. Cutter sighed. "You're gonna get us both killed someday," he said, but his voice held no anger. He built a small fire in the shelter of the wash, the flames hidden from distant eyes. He cleaned the wound with the last of his whiskey, she stirred and moaned faintly at the sting, and then bound it tight with cloth. Her breathing steadied, though her skin still felt cool beneath his fingers. When he'd done all he could, he sat back against the rock, watching her in the flickering light. It was strange, how quiet the desert felt now. The night wind whispered across the sand, carrying the faint cry of coyotes somewhere far off. The stars came out sharp and cold, 1,000 pinpricks of silver overhead. Cutter felt a heaviness in his chest that wasn't quite weariness, but something older, like a memory that wouldn't let go. He thought of the war, of the faces of men he'd shot and men he'd buried. He wondered how many of them had died as helpless as this woman before him, alone in the dust. Near midnight, she began to stir again. Her eyes opened, and this time they stayed open. She tried to sit up, but the pain stopped her, and she fell back with a gasp. Cutter moved quickly, pressing a hand to her shoulder. "Easy," he said gently. "You're hurt. Lie still." She blinked up at him, breathing fast. He could see the fear in her, though she tried to hide it. Her gaze darted from his face to the gun at his side, then to the horse standing nearby. "I'm not gonna hurt you," he said slowly, speaking each word with care. "Do you understand?" She didn't answer, but her eyes softened slightly. He pointed to himself. "Sam." Then he gestured toward her, raising his brows in question. For a moment she only looked at him, then whispered a single word, her voice rough and low. "Nayland." "Good," he said. Nayland. The name fit her somehow, strong and simple. She closed her eyes again, exhausted. Cutter tended the fire, then sat awake beside her until the first gray light touched the sky. When morning came, the desert looked reborn. The air was cool and clear, the horizon painted with pink and gold. Nayland was still asleep, her breathing even now. Cutter rose quietly and walked to the edge of the wash, scanning the distance for signs of movement. He saw nothing but the empty sweep of land, the far shimmer of the mountains. He felt both relief and unease, relief that they were alone, unease because that might not last. Whoever had shot her could still be out there. When he returned, Nayland was awake. She watched him closely as he approached, her expression guarded but not hostile. He offered her a small piece of dried meat, which she hesitated before taking. She ate slowly, every motion deliberate, her eyes never leaving him. Cutter smiled faintly. "You're tougher than you look." She didn't understand the words, but she seemed to catch the tone. Over the next few hours, Cutter tried to learn more. He used gestures, pointing to the wound, then making the shape of a gun with his fingers, raising his eyebrows in question. Nayland looked away, her mouth tightening. Finally, she made a motion, two hands clawing like talons, swooping down. "Cavalry?" he asked softly. She nodded once. Cutter felt his stomach twist. He'd seen it before. Patrols gone rogue, young officers hungry for glory treating every Apache as a target. He had no love left for the army he once served. She tried to sit up again, and this time he helped her. The movement made her wince, but she didn't cry out. There was strength in her, the kind born of long survival. Cutter found himself admiring her resolve. He poured more water for her, then began packing their few supplies. "We can't stay here," he said, knowing she wouldn't understand but saying it anyway. Too open, too many eyes. He lifted her carefully onto Solomon's back, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. The horse stood perfectly still, as if understanding the fragility of his burden. Cutter took the reins and began walking, leading them toward a line of hills in the distance where he knew there were caves and shade. The journey was slow, the sun merciless by mid-morning. Nayland swayed in the saddle but clung to consciousness, her eyes scanning the land as though mapping it from memory. By the time they reached the shelter of the rocks, Cutter was sweating through his shirt, his throat raw from thirst. He helped her down and guided her into the shadow of a shallow cave. She collapsed gratefully against the cool stone. He unsaddled Solomon, rubbed him down, and whispered a word of thanks to the horse that had led him here. As the afternoon passed, he found himself thinking about how strange fate could be, how a man could wander half a lifetime through war and emptiness only to be pulled into something that felt, for the first time, like purpose. He didn't know what would happen next. Maybe the soldiers who had done this would come back. Maybe she would die anyway. But for the moment, she was alive, and that was enough. When she woke again near dusk, he found her looking at him with something new in her eyes. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. He offered her a smile, small and uncertain. "You're safe," he said, though neither of them could know if that was true. The desert around them glowed red with the setting sun, and somewhere beyond the horizon, the wind carried the faint echo of distant hoofbeats, or maybe it was only his imagination. Either way, the silence between them felt charged, like the moment before a storm. Cutter settled back against the rock, his rifle across his knees, watching the last light fade. Nayland slept again, her breathing deep and steady. Solomon grazed quietly nearby. For the first time in years, Samuel Cutter felt something that might have been peace, though it was fragile as glass. He didn't know where this path would lead, only that his horse had chosen it, and that somehow, without understanding why, he had followed. And in that simple act of following, something had begun to change, though neither man nor woman yet knew what it would cost them, or what it would save.